This is The Sea Lady, A Tissue of Moonshine, written by H.G. Wells. Published in 1902, this book is in the public domain. Narration by ElevenLabs professional voice clone, Anna Rita 2. Chapter 7. The Crisis. Section 1. The crisis came about a week from that time, I say, about because of Melville's conscientious inexactness in these matters. And so far as the crisis goes, I seem to get Melville at his best. He was keenly interested, keenly observant, and his more than average memory took some excellent impressions. To my mind, at any rate, 2 at least of these people come out, fuller and more convincingly than anywhere else in this painfully disinterred story. He has given me here an Adeline I seem to believe in, and something much more like Chatteris than any of the broken fragments I have had to go upon, and amplify and fudge together so far. And for all such transient lucidities in this mysterious story, the reader no doubt will echo my "Heaven be thanked." Melville was called down to participate in the crisis at Sandgate by a telegram from Mrs. Bunting, and his first exponent of the situation was Fred Bunting. "Come down, urgent, please," was the irresistible message from Mrs. Bunting. My cousin took the early train and arrived at Sandgate in the forenoon. He was told that Mrs. Bunting was upstairs with Miss Glendower and that she implored him to wait until she could leave her charge. "Miss Glendower not well, then?" said Melville. "No, sir, not at all well," said the housemaid, evidently awaiting a further question. "Where are the others?" he asked casually. "The 3 younger young ladies had gone to Hythe," said the housemaid, with a marked omission of the Sea Lady. Melville has an intense dislike of questioning servants on points at issue, so he asked nothing at all concerning Miss Waters. This general absence of people from the room of familiar occupation conveyed the same suggested warning of crisis as the telegram. The housemaid waited an instant longer and withdrew. He stood for a moment in the drawing-room and then walked out upon the veranda. He perceived a richly caparisoned figure advancing towards him. It was Fred Bunting. He had been taking advantage of the general desertion of home to bathe from the house. He was wearing an umbrageous white cotton hat and a striped blanket, and a more aggressively manly pipe than any fully adult male would ever dream of smoking, hung from the corner of his mouth. "Hello," he said. "The martyr sent for you." Melville admitted the truth of this theory. "There's ructions," said Fred, and removed the pipe. The act offered conversation. "Where's Miss Waters?" "Gone." "Back?" "Lord, no. Catch her. She's gone to Lummidge's Hotel with her maid, took a suite." "Why?" "The mater made a row with her." "Whatever for?" "Harry." My cousin stared at the situation. "It broke out," said Fred. "What broke out?" "The row. Harry's gone daft on her, Addie says." "On Miss Waters?" "Rather moony. Didn't care for his electioneering, didn't care for his ordinary nourishment, loose ends. Didn't mention it to Adeline, but she began to see it, asked questions. Next day, went off, London. She asked what was up. 3 days' silence. Then wrote to her. Fred intensified all this by raising his eyebrows, pulling down the corners of his mouth and nodding portentously. "Eh?" he said, and then, to make things clearer, wrote a letter. "He didn't write to her about Miss Waters?" "Don't know what he wrote about." "Don't suppose he mentioned her name, but I dare say he made it clear enough. All I know is that everything in the house felt like elastic, pulled tighter than it ought to be for 2 whole days, everybody in a sort of complicated twist, and then there was a snap. All that time Addie was writing letters to him and tearing 'em up, and no one could quite make it out. Everyone looked blue except the Sea Lady. She kept her own lovely pink, and at the end of that time the martyr began asking things. Adeline chucked writing, gave the martyr half a hint. Martha took it all in an instant, and the thing burst. Miss Glendower didn't— No, the mater did. Put it pretty straight too, as the martyr can. She didn't deny it. Said she couldn't help herself, and that he was as much hers as Adeline's. I heard that, said Fred shamelessly. Pretty thick, eh? Considering he's engaged. And the martyr gave it her pretty straight. Said, I've been very much deceived in you, Miss Waters, very much, indeed. I heard her. And then asked her to go. Said she'd requited us ill for taking her up when nobody but a fisherman would have looked at her. She said that? Well, words to that effect. And Miss Waters went in a first-class cab, maid and boxes in another, all complete. Perfect lady. Couldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it, the tail, I mean. And Miss Glendower? Addie? Oh, she's been going it. Comes downstairs and does the pale-faced heroine and goes upstairs and does the broken-hearted part. I know. It's all very well. You never had sisters. You know— Fred held his pipe elaborately out of the way and protruded his face to a confidential nearness. I believe they half like it, said Fred in a confidential half-whisper. Such a go, you know. Mabel pretty near as bad. And the girls. All making the very most they can of it. Me, I think Chatteris was the only man alive to hear 'em. I couldn't get up emotion as they do if my feet were being flayed. Cheerful home, eh? For holidays. Where's the principal gentleman? Asked Melville a little grimly. In London? Unprincipled gentleman, I call him, said Fred. He's stopping down here at the Metropole. Stuck. Down here? Stuck. Rather, stuck and set about. My cousin tried for sidelights. What's his attitude? He asked. Slump, said Fred with intensity. This little blow-off has rather astonished him, he explained, when he wrote to say that the election didn't interest him for a bit, but he hoped to pull around. You said you didn't know what he wrote. I do that much, said Fred. He no more thought they'd have spotted that it meant Miss Waters than a baby. But women are so thundering sharp, you know. They're born spotters. How it'll all end. But why has he come to the Metropole? Middle of the stage, I suppose, said Fred. What's his attitude? Says he's going to see Adeline and explain everything and doesn't do it. Puts it off. And Adeline, as far as I can gather, says that if he doesn't come down soon, she's hanged if she'll see him, much as her heart may be broken, and all that if she doesn't. You know. Naturally, said Melville rather inconsecutively. And he doesn't? Doesn't stir. Does he see the other lady? We don't know, we can't watch him, but if he does, he's clever. Why? There's about 100 blessed relatives of his in the place came like crows for a corpse. I never saw such a lot. Talk about a man of good old family, it's decaying. I never saw such a high old family in my life. Aunts they are chiefly. Aunts? Aunts! Say they've rallied round him. How they got hold of it I don't know, like vultures, unless the mater— But they're here. They're all at him, using their influence with him, threatening to cut off legacies and all that. There's one old girl at Bates, Lady Pointing Mallow Least, bit horsey, but about as all right as any of 'em, who's been down here twice. Seems a trifle disappointed in Adeline. And there's 2 aunts at Wampatches. You know the sort that stop at Wampatches. Regular hothouse flowers. A watering pot full of real icy cold water would kill both of 'em. And there's one come over from the continent. Short hair, short skirts, regular terror. She's at the pavilion. They're all chasing round saying, where is this woman-fish sort of thing? Let me peek? Does that constitute the 100 relatives? Practically, the Wampatches are sending for a bishop who used to be his schoolmaster. No stone unturned, eh? None. And has he found out yet that she's a mermaid? I don't believe he has. The pater went up to tell him. Of course he was a bit out of breath and embarrassed, and Chatteris cut him down. At least let me hear nothing against her, he said, and the pater took that and came away. Good old pater. Eh? And the aunts? They're taking it in. Mainly they grasp the fact that he's going to jilt Adeline, just as he jilted the American girl. The mermaid side they seem to boggle at. Old people like that don't take to a new idea all at once. The one-patch ones are shocked but curious. They don't believe for a moment she really is a mermaid, but they want to know all about it. And the one down at the pavilion simply said, "Bosh! How can she breathe under water? Tell me that, Mrs. Bunting. She's some sort of person you have picked up, I don't know how, but mermaid she cannot be." They'd be all tremendously down on the mater, I think, for picking her up, if it wasn't that they can't do without her help to bring Addie round again. Pretty mess all round, eh? I suppose the aunts will tell him. What? About the tale. I suppose they will. And what then? Heaven knows, just as likely they won't. My cousin meditated on the veranda tiles for a space. "It amuses me," said Fred Bunting. "Look here," said my cousin Melville, "what am I supposed to do? Why have I been asked to come? I don't know, stir it up a bit, I expect. Everybody do a bit like the Christmas pudding." "But," said Melville. "I've been bathing," said Fred. "Nobody asked me to take a hand, and I didn't. It won't be a good pudding without me, but there you are. There's only one thing I can see to do." "It might be the right thing." "What is it?" "Punch Chatteris's head." "I don't see how that would help matters." "Oh, it wouldn't help matters," said Fred, adding with an air of conclusiveness, "There it is." Then, adjusting the folds of his blanket to a greater dignity, and replacing his long extinct large pipe between his teeth, he went on his way. The tail of his blanket followed him reluctantly through the door. His bare feet padded across the hall and became inaudible on the carpet of the stairs. "Fred," said Melville, going doorward with a sudden afterthought for fuller particulars. But Fred had gone. Instead, Mrs. Bunting appeared. Section 2. She appeared with traces of recent emotion. "I telegraphed," she said. "We are in dreadful trouble. Miss Waters, I gather—" "She's gone." She went towards the bell and stopped. "They'll get luncheon as usual," she said. "You will be wanting your luncheon." She came towards him with rising hands. "You cannot imagine," she said. "That poor child." "You must tell me," said Melville. "I simply do not know what to do. I don't know where to turn." She came nearer to him. She protested. "All that I did, Mr. Melville, I did for the best. I saw there was trouble. I could see that I had been deceived, and I stood it as long as I could. I had to speak at last." My cousin, by leading questions and interrogative silences, developed her story a little. "And everyone," she said, "blames me. Everyone." "Everybody blames everybody who does anything in affairs of this sort," said Melville. "You mustn't mind that." "I'll try not to," she said bravely. "You know, Mr. Melville—" He laid his hand on her shoulder for a moment. "Yes," he said very impressively, and I think Mrs. Bunting felt better. "We all look to you," she said. "I don't know what I should do without you." "That's it," said Melville. "How do things stand?" "What am I to do?" "Go to him," said Mrs. Bunting, "and put it all right." "But suppose—" began Melville doubtfully. "Go to her. Make her see what it would mean for him and all of us." He tried to get more definite instructions. "Don't make difficulties," implored Mrs. Bunting. "Think of that poor girl upstairs. Think of us all." "Exactly," said Melville, thinking of Chatteris and staring despondently out of the window. "Bunting, I gather." "It is you or no one," said Mrs. Bunting, sailing over his unspoken words. "Fred is too young, and Randolph, he's not diplomatic. He hectors." "Does he?" exclaimed Melville. "You should see him abroad. Often, many times, I have had to interfere. No, it is you. You know Harry so well. He trusts you. You can say things to him no one else could say." "That reminds me." Does he know? We don't know. How can we know? We know he is infatuated, that is all. He is up there in Folkestone, and she is in Folkestone, and they may be meeting. My cousin sought counsel with himself. Say you will go, said Mrs. Bunting, with a hand upon his arm. I'll go, said Melville, but I don't see what I can do. And Mrs. Bunting clasped his hand in both of her own plump, shapely hands and said she knew all along that he would, and that for coming down so promptly to her telegram she would be grateful to him so long as she had a breath to draw. And then she added, as if it were part of the same remark, that he must want his luncheon. He accepted the luncheon proposition in an incidental manner, and reverted to the question in hand. Do you know what his attitude? He has written only to Addie. It isn't as if he had brought about this crisis. It was Addie. He went away, and something in his manner made her write and ask him the reason why. So soon as she had his letter saying he wanted to rest from politics for a little, that somehow he didn't seem to find the interest in life he thought it deserved, she divined everything. Everything? Yes, but just what is everything? That she had led him on. Miss Waters? Yes, my cousin reflected, so that was what they considered to be everything. I wish I knew just where he stood, he said at last, and followed Mrs. Bunting luncheonward. In the course of that meal, which was tête-à-tête, it became almost unsatisfactorily evident what a great relief Melville's consent to interview Chatteris was to Mrs. Bunting. Indeed, she seemed to consider herself relieved from the greater portion of her responsibility in the matter, since Melville was bearing her burden. She sketched out her defence against the accusations that had no doubt been levelled at her, explicitly and implicitly. How was I to know? She asked, and she told over again the story of that memorable landing, but with new, extenuating details. It was Adeline herself who had cried first. She must be saved. Mrs. Bunting made a special point of that. And what else was there for me to do? She asked. And as she talked, the problem before my cousin assumed graver and yet graver proportions. He perceived more and more clearly the complexity of the situation with which he was entrusted. In the first place, it was not at all clear that Miss Glendower was willing to receive back her lover except upon terms, and the sea lady, he was quite sure, did not mean to release him from any grip she had upon him. They were preparing to treat an elemental struggle as if it were an individual case. It grew more and more evident to him how entirely Mrs. Bunting overlooked the essentially abnormal nature of the sea lady, how absolutely she regarded the business as a mere everyday vacillation, a commonplace outbreak of that jilting spirit which dwells, covered deep perhaps, but never entirely eradicated, in the heart of man, and how confidently she expected him, with a little tactful remonstrance and pressure, to restore the status quo ante. As for Chatteris, Melville shook his head at the cheese and answered Mrs. Bunting abstractedly. Section 3. She wants to speak to you, said Mrs. Bunting, and Melville, with a certain trepidation, went upstairs. He went up to the big landing with the seats, to save Adeline the trouble of coming down. She appeared dressed in a black and violet tea-gown with much lace, and her dark hair was done with a simple carefulness that suited it. She was pale, and her eyes showed traces of tears, but she had a certain dignity that differed from her usual bearing in being quite unconscious. She gave him a limp hand and spoke in an exhausted voice. "You know all?" she asked. "All the outline, anyhow." "Why has he done this to me?" Melville looked profoundly sympathetic through a pause. "I feel," she said, "that it isn't coarseness." "Certainly not," said Melville. "It is some mystery of the imagination that I cannot understand. I should have thought his career at any rate would have appealed." She shook her head and regarded a pot of ferns fixedly for a space. "He has written to you?" asked Melville. 3 times, she said, looking up. Melville hesitated to ask the extent of that correspondence, but she left no need for that. I had to ask him, she said. He kept it all from me, and I had to force it from him before he would tell. Tell, said Melville. What? What he felt for her and what he felt for me. But did he? He has made it clearer. But still even now, no, I don't understand. She turned slowly and watched Melville's face as she spoke. You know, Mr. Melville, that this has been an enormous shock to me. I suppose I never really knew him. I suppose I idealised him. I thought he cared for our work, at any rate. He did care for our work. He believed in it. Surely he believed in it. He does, said Melville. And then, but how can he? He is a man with rather a strong imagination, or a weak will. Relatively, yes. It is so strange, she sighed. It is so inconsistent. It is like a child catching at a new toy. Do you know, Mr. Melville, she hesitated, all this has made me feel old. I feel very much older, very much wiser than he is. I cannot help it. I am afraid it is for all women to feel that sometimes. She reflected profoundly. For all women, the child man, I see now just what Sarah Grand meant by that. She smiled a wan smile. I feel just as if he had been a naughty child. And I worshipped him, Mr. Melville, she said, and her voice quivered. My cousin coughed and turned about to stare hard out of the window. He was, he perceived, much more shockingly inadequate even than he had expected to be. If I thought she could make him happy, she said presently, leaving a hiatus of generous self-sacrifice. The case is complicated, said Melville. Her voice went on, clear and a little high, resigned, impenetrably assured. But she would not. All his better side, all his serious side, she would miss it and ruin it all. Does he... began Melville, and repented of the temerity of his question. Yes, she said. Does he ask to be released? No, he wants to come back to me. And you... He doesn't come. But do you want him back? How can I say, Mr. Melville? He does not say certainly even that he wants to come back. My cousin Melville looked perplexed. He lived on the superficies of emotion, and these complexities in matters he had always assumed were simple put him out. There are times, she said, when it seems to me that my love for him is altogether dead. Think of the disillusionment, the shock, the discovery of such weakness. My cousin lifted his eyebrows and shook his head in agreement. His feet to find his feet were of clay. There came a pause. It seems as if I have never loved him. And then I think of all the things that still might be. Her voice made him look up, and he saw that her mouth was set hard and tears were running down her cheeks. It occurred to my cousin, he says, that he would touch her hand in a sympathetic manner, and then it occurred to him that he wouldn't. Her words rang in his thoughts for a space, and then he said somewhat tardily, He may still be all those things. I suppose he may, she said slowly and without colour. The weeping moment had passed. What is she? She changed abruptly. What is this being who has come between him and all the realities of life? What is there about her? And why should I have to compete with her because he doesn't know his own mind? For a man, said Melville, to know his own mind is to have exhausted one of the chief interests in life. After that, a cultivated, extinct volcano, if ever it was a volcano. He reflected egotistically for a space. Then with a secret start he came back to consider her. What is there, she said, with that deliberate attempt at clearness which was one of her antipathetic qualities for Melville. What is there that she has, that she offers, that Melville winced at this deliberate proposal of appalling comparisons. All the cat-like quality in his soul came to his aid. He began to edge away and walk obliquely and generally to shirk the issue. "My dear Miss Glendower," he said, and tried to make that seem an adequate reply. "What is the difference?" she insisted. "There are impalpable things," waved Melville. "They are above reason and beyond describing." "But you," she urged, "you take an attitude. You must have an impression. Why don't you see, Mr. Melville, this is very," her voice caught for a moment, "very vital for me. It isn't kind of you, if you have impressions. I'm sorry, Mr. Melville, if I seem to be trying to get too much from you. I want to know." It came into Melville's head for a moment that this girl had something in her, perhaps, that was just a little beyond his former judgments. "I must admit I have a sort of impression," he said. "You are a man, you know him, you know all sorts of things, all sorts of ways of looking at things I don't know, if you could go so far as to be frank." "Well," said Melville, and stopped. She hung over him, as it were, as a tense silence. "There is a difference," he admitted, and still went unhelped. "How can I put it? I think in certain ways you contrast with her in a way that makes things easier for her. He has, I know the thing sounds like cant, only, you know, he doesn't plead it in defence. He has a temperament, to which she sometimes appeals more than you do." "Yes, I know, but how?" "Well, tell me. You are austere, you are restrained. Life, for a man like Chatteris, is schooling. He has something perhaps more worth having than most of us have, but I think at times it makes life harder for him than it is for a lot of us. Life comes at him with limitations and regulations. He knows his duty well enough. And you mustn't mind what I say too much, Miss Glendower. I may be wrong." "Go on," she said. "Go on. You are too much the agent general of his duty." "But surely, what else? I talked to him in London, and then I thought he was quite in the wrong. Since that, I've thought all sorts of things, even that you might be in the wrong, in certain minor things." "Don't mind my vanity now," she cried. "Tell me." "You see, you have defined things very clearly. You have made it clear to him what you expect him to be and what you expect him to do. It is like having built a house in which he is to live. For him to go to her is like going out of a house, a very fine and dignified house, I admit, into something larger, something adventurous and incalculable. She has an air of being natural. She is as lax and lawless as the sunset. She is as free and familiar as the wind. She doesn't, if I may put it in this way, she doesn't love and respect him when he is this, and disapprove of him highly when he is that. She takes him all together. She has the quality of the open sky, of the flight of birds, of deep, tangled places. She has the quality of the high sea. That, I think, is what she is for him. She is the great outside. You have the quality." He hesitated. "Go on," she insisted. "Let us get the meaning." "Of an edifice? I don't sympathise with him," said Melville. "I am a tame cat, and I should scratch and mew at the door directly I got outside of things. I don't want to go out. The thought scares me. But he is different." "Yes," she said, "he is different." For a time it seemed that Melville's interpretation had hold of her. She stood thoughtful. Slowly other aspects of the thing came into his mind. "Of course," she said, thinking as she looked at him. Yes, that is the impression, that is the quality, but in reality there are other things in the world beside effects and impressions. After all, that is an analogy. It is pleasant to go out of houses and dwellings into the open air, but most of us, nearly all of us, must live in houses." "Decidedly," said Melville, "he cannot. What can he do with her? How can he live with her? What life could they have in common? It's a case of attraction, said Melville, and not of plans. After all, she said, he must come back if I let him come back. He may spoil everything now. He may lose his election and be forced to start again, lower and less hopefully. He may tear his heart to pieces. She stopped at a sob. Miss Glendower, said Melville abruptly, I don't think you quite understand. Understand what? You think he cannot marry this being who has come among us? How could he? No, he couldn't. You think his imagination has wandered away from you to something impossible, that generally, in an aimless way, he has cut himself up for nothing, and made an inordinate fool of himself, and that it's simply a business of putting everything back into place again. He paused, and she said nothing, but her face was attentive. What you do not understand, he went on, what no one seems to understand, is that she comes out of the sea, out of some other world. She comes, whispering that this life is a phantom life, unreal, flimsy, limited, casting upon everything a spell of disillusionment, so that he... Yes, and then she whispers, there are better dreams. The girl regarded him in frank perplexity. She hints of these vague better dreams. She whispers of a way. What way? I do not know what way, but it is something that tears at the very fabric of this daily life. You mean... She is a mermaid, she is a thing of dreams and desires, a siren, a whisper and a seduction. She will lure him with her. He stopped. Where? She whispered. Into the deeps. The deeps? They hung upon a long pause. Melville sought vagueness with infinite solicitude and could not find it. He blurted out at last, There can be but one way out of this dream we are all dreaming, you know? And that way? That way, began Melville, and dared not say it. You mean, she said with a pale face, half awakened to a new thought, the way is... Melville shirked the word. He met her eyes and nodded weakly. But how? She asked. At any rate, he said hastily, seeking some palliative phrase, at any rate, if she gets him, this little world of yours, there will be no coming back for him, you know. No coming back? She said. No coming back, said Melville. But are you sure? She doubted. Sure that it is so. That desire is desire, and the deep, yes. I never thought, she began and stopped. Mr. Melville, she said, you know I don't understand. I thought I scarcely know what I thought. I thought he was trivial and foolish to let his thoughts go wandering. I agreed. I see your point as to the difference in our effect upon him. But this suggestion that for him she may be something determining and final. After all, she is nothing, he said. She is the hand that takes hold of him, the shape that stands for things unseen. What things unseen? My cousin shrugged his shoulders. Something we never find in life, he said. Something we are always seeking. But what? She asked. Melville made no reply. She scrutinized his face for a time and then looked out at the sunlight again. Do you want him back? He said. I don't know. Do you want him back? I feel as if I had never wanted him before, and now... Yes, but if he will not come back... He will not come back, said Melville, for the work. I know. He will not come back for his self-respect or any of those things. No, those things, you know, are only fainter dreams. All the palace you have made for him is a dream, but... Yes... He might come back, he said, and looked at her and stopped. He tells me he had some vague intention of startling her, rousing her, wounding her to some display of romantic force, some insurgence of passion that might yet win Chatteris back. And then in that moment, and like a blow, it came to him how foolish such a fancy had been. There she stood impenetrably herself, limitedly intelligent, well-meaning, imitative, and powerless. Her pose, her face, suggested nothing but a clear and reasonable objection to all that had come to her, a critical antagonism, a steady opposition. And then, amazingly, she changed. She looked up and suddenly held out both her hands, and there was something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Melville took her hands mechanically, and for a second or so they stood looking with a sort of discovery into each other's eyes. "Tell him," she said with an astounding perfection of simplicity, "to come back to me. There can be no other thing than what I am. Tell him to come back to me, and tell him that. Forgiveness? No. Tell him I want him. If he will not come for that, he will not come at all. If he will not come back for that," she halted for a moment, "I do not want him. No, I do not want him. He is not mine, and he may go." His passive hold of her hands became a pressure. Then they dropped apart again. "You are very good to help us," she said as he turned to go. He looked at her. "You are very good to help me," she said, and then, "Tell him whatever you like if only he will come back to me. No, tell him what I have said." He saw she had something more to say, and stopped. "You know, Mr. Melville, all this is like a book newly opened to me. Are you sure?" "Sure? Sure of what you say, sure of what she is to him, sure that if he goes on, he will—" She stopped. He nodded. "It means," she said, and stopped again, "no adventure, no incident, but a going out from all that this life has to offer." "You mean," she insisted, "you mean—" "Death," said Melville starkly, and for a space both stood without a word. She winced and remained looking into his eyes. Then she spoke again. "Mr. Melville, tell him to come back to me. And tell him to come back to me, or—" a sudden note of passion rang in her voice, "if I have no hold upon him, let him go his way." "But," said Melville. "I know," she cried with her face set, "I know. But if he is mine, he will come to me, and if he is not, let him dream his dream." Her clenched hand tightened as she spoke. He saw in her face she would say no more, that she wanted urgently to leave it there. He turned again towards the staircase. He glanced at her and went down. As he looked up from the bend of the stairs, she was still standing in the light. He was moved to proclaim himself in some manner her adherent, but he could think of nothing better than, "Whatever I can do, I will." And so, after a curious pause, he departed, rather stumblingly, from her sight. Section 4. After this interview, it was right and proper that Melville should have gone at once to Chatteris, but the course of events in the world does occasionally display a lamentable disregard for what is right and proper. Points of view were destined to crowd upon him that day, for the most part entirely unsympathetic points of view. He found Mrs. Bunting in the company of a boldly trimmed bonnet in the hall, waiting, it became clear, to intercept him. As he descended in a state of extreme preoccupation, the boldly trimmed bonnet revealed beneath it a white-faced, resolute person in a duster and sensible boots. This stranger, Mrs. Bunting made apparent, was Lady Poynting Mallow, one of the more representative of the Chatteris aunts. Her ladyship made a few inquiries about Adeline with an eye that took Melville's measure, and then, after agreeing to a number of the suggestions Mrs. Bunting had to advance, proposed that he should escort her back to her hotel. He was much too exercised with Adeline to discuss the proposal. "I walk," she said, "and we go along the lower road." He found himself walking. She remarked, as the bunting door closed behind them, that it was always a comfort to have to do with a man, and there was a silence for a space. I don't think at that time Melville completely grasped the fact that he had a companion, but presently his meditations were disturbed by her voice. He started. "I beg your pardon," he said. "That bunting woman is a fool," repeated Lady Poynting Mallow. There was a slight interval for consideration. "She's an old friend of mine," said Melville. "Quite possibly," said Lady Poynting Mallow. The position seemed a little awkward to Melville for a moment. He flicked a fragment of orange peel into the road. "I want to get to the bottom of all this," said Lady Poynting Mallow. "Who is this other woman?" "What other woman?" "Tertium quid," said Lady Poynting Mallow with a luminous incorrectness. "Mermaid, I gather," said Melville. "What's the objection to her?" "Tail." "Fin and all?" "Complete." "You're sure of it?" "Certain." "How do you know?" "I'm certain," repeated Melville with a quite unusual testiness. The lady reflected. "Well, there are worse things in the world than a fishy tail," she said at last. Melville saw no necessity for a reply. Said Lady Poynting Mallow, apparently by way of comment on his silence, and for a space they went on. "That Glendower girl is a fool too," she added after a pause. My cousin opened his mouth and shut it again. How can one answer when ladies talk in this way? But if he did not answer, at any rate his preoccupation was gone. He was now acutely aware of the determined person at his side. "She has means?" she asked abruptly. "Miss Glendower?" "No." "I know all about her? The other? The mermaid?" "Yes, the mermaid. Why not?" "Oh, she very considerable means. Galleons, Phoenician treasure ships, wrecked frigates, submarine reefs. Well, that's all right. And now will you tell me, Mr. Melville, why shouldn't Harry have her? What if she is a mermaid? It's no worse than an American silver mine, and not nearly so raw and ill-bred. In the first place, there's his engagement." "Oh, that! And in the next, there's the sea lady. But I thought she's a mermaid." "It's no objection. So far as I can see, she'd make an excellent wife for him. And, as a matter of fact, down here she'd be able to help him in just the right way. The member here he'll be fighting, this Sassoon man, makes a lot of capital out of deep-sea cables. Couldn't be better. Harry could dish him easily. That's all right. Why shouldn't he have her?" She stuck her hands deeply into the pockets of her dust coat, and a china blue eye regarded Melville from under the brim of the boldly trimmed bonnet. "You understand clearly she is a properly constituted mermaid with a real physical tail." "Well," said Lady Poynting Mallow, "apart from any question of Miss Glendower, that's understood. I think that such a marriage would be impossible." "Why?" My cousin played round the question. "She's an immortal, for example, with a past." "Simply makes her more interesting." Melville tried to enter into her point of view. "You think," he said, "she would go to London for him, and marry at St. George's, Hanover Square, and pay for a mansion in Park Lane, and visit just anywhere he liked? That's precisely what she would do. Just now, with a court that is waking up." "It's precisely what she won't do," said Melville. "But any woman would do it who had the chance. She's a mermaid." "She's a fool," said Lady Poynting Mallow. "She doesn't even mean to marry him. It doesn't enter into her code." "The hussy! What does she mean?" My cousin made a gesture seaward. "That," he said. "She's a mermaid." "What?" "Out there." "Where?" "There." Lady Poynting Mallow scanned the sea as if it were some curious new object. "It's an amphibious outlook for the family," she said after reflection. "But even then, if she doesn't care for society and it makes Harry happy, and perhaps after they are tired of rusticating—" "I don't think you fully realise that she is a mermaid," said Melville, "and Chatteris, you know, breathes air." "That is a difficulty," admitted Lady Poynting Mallow, and studied the sunlit offing for a space. "I don't see why it shouldn't be managed for all that," she considered after a pause. "It can't be," said Melville with arid emphasis. "She cares for him. She's come to fetch him. If she wants him badly, he might make terms. In these affairs, it's always one or other has to do the buying. She'd have to marry anyhow." My cousin regarded her impenetrably satisfied face. "He could have a yacht and a diving bell," she suggested, "if she wanted him to visit her people. They are pagan demigods, I believe, and live in some mythological way in the Mediterranean. Dear Harry's a pagan himself, so that doesn't matter. And as for being mythological, all good families are. He could even wear a diving dress if one could be found to suit him." "I don't think that anything of the sort is possible for a moment." "Simply because you've never been a woman in love," said Lady Poynting Mallow with an air of vast experience. She continued the conversation. "If it's seawater she wants, it would be quite easy to fit up a tank wherever they lived, and she could easily have a bath chair like a sitz bath on wheels. Really, Mr. Melville, I don't see where your impossible comes in. Have you seen the lady? Do you think I've been in Folkestone 2 days doing nothing?" "You don't mean you've called on her?" "Dear, no. It's Harry's place to settle that. But I've seen her in her bath chair on the Leas, and I'm certain I've never seen anyone who looked so worthy of dear Harry. Never." "Well, well," said Melville, "apart from any other considerations, you know, there's Miss Glendower. I've never regarded her as a suitable wife for Harry." "Possibly not. Still, she exists." "So many people do," said Lady Poynting Mallow. She evidently regarded that branch of the subject as dismissed. They pursued their way in silence. "What I wanted to ask you, Mr. Melville, Mr. Melville, is just precisely where you come into this business. I'm a friend of Miss Glendower. Who wants him back? Frankly, yes. Isn't she devoted to him? I presume as she's engaged, she ought to be devoted to him, yes. Well, why can't she see that she ought to release him for his own good? She doesn't see it's for his good, nor do I. Simply an old-fashioned prejudice because the woman's got a tail. Those old frumps at Wampatches are quite of your opinion." Melville shrugged his shoulders. "And so I suppose you're going to bully and threaten on account of Miss Glendower. You'll do no good.